Good morning, Year 5, and welcome to the next week's work that I'm going to set you in English. Okay, last week we looked at writing biographies and we wrote the biography about Tim Peake. And this week we are going to have a look at narrative writing. Now, this week's narrative writing is going to be set in space. I wonder if you know what the genre of narrative writing that's set in space is called. Have a little think. Can anybody think what it's called? It's actually known as science fiction. Well done if you got that right. So we're going to be writing some science fiction. This unit will build on the narrative writing skills that we practiced when we read and worked on Ted Hughes' The Iron Man. Just like that story, we'll be looking at unusual creatures, but this time we'll be setting our story in space. As we've established, stories and films that have a space setting are called science fiction. This week, we'll be reading a story called The Way Back Home by Oliver Jeffers. You may well have seen it before, and if you've got younger brothers and sisters, you may well have a copy lying around. If not, we will show you the book online. So have a little think. What do you think this story is going to be about? You can see, hopefully, that there is the moon, and there seems to be, is that a little boy and an alien on the moon? And an aeroplane and a spaceship, and it looks far up in space, up above the houses. So maybe that gives you a clue as to where it's going to take place. And this is the blurb from the back of the book. I always like to check that to see whether I would like to read the story. And it says, once there was a boy who one day found himself stuck on the moon, and he was not alone. So already that captures my interest because I'm like, well, how did he get stuck on the moon? How did he get up there in the first place? And he was not alone. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So stop the video for a minute and have a think. What are your initial thoughts and reactions? How does this make you feel? Just pause for a minute and have a think looking at the picture. Welcome back, Year 5. So when I look at this picture, I think of the vastness of space. And that little boy, he does look very alone because of that, doesn't he? There's nothing else around, no buildings. There looks like one little thing over here that looks a little bit like a tree. I don't think it is, but looks very strange. And then all he can see is the stars all around him. So I wonder how he feels. Maybe a little bit scared, maybe a little bit alone. Maybe he's a little bit excited about being somewhere different. Not sure how you will be feeling. So let's listen to the story. I'm not going to read the story to you, but somebody else is. But I'm going to play it from now. Here we go. Listen.
Story time with Rocket.
The Way Back Home by Oliver Jeffers. Once there was a boy. And one day, as he was putting his things back in the cupboard, he found an aeroplane. He didn't remember leaving it in there, but he thought he'd take it out for a go right away. The plane lifted off the ground and up into the sky, higher and higher and higher. Suddenly, the plane spluttered. It had ran out of petrol. Now the boy was stuck on the moon. What was he to do? He was all alone and afraid, and soon his torch began to go out. Up in space, someone else was in trouble too. His engine had broken down. And steering the ship towards a flicker of light, he landed on the moon with a bump. Both the boy and the Martian could hear noises in the dark, and both feared the worst. But as their eyes got used to the dark, they both realised they'd met someone else in trouble. They weren't alone anymore. The boy showed the Martian his empty petrol tank, and the Martian showed the boy his broken engine. Together they thought of ways to fix their machines and how to get them both back home. The boy jumped down to earth to get the things they would need, right down into the sea, and swam towards home. But by the time he got there, the boy was tired out, so he sat in his favourite chair just to catch his breath. His favourite programme was just starting, and he settled down to watch. Suddenly, he remembered what he should be doing and rushed off to the cupboard to get what he needed. He ran outside and shouted, but there was no reply. He couldn't be heard. The boy climbed to higher ground, called again, and waited. This time, a rope was lowered. The boy began to climb, and the Martian began to pull, and soon the boy was back on the moon. The boy fixed up the Martian's engine with the right spanner, and the Martian filled the boy's petrol tank. They said goodbye and thanked each other for their help. They wondered if they'd ever meet again. After a long night, they were both finally off the moon. The boy went one way, and the Martian went another, both on their way back home. The end.
I hope you enjoyed listening to the story. Now imagine you were the boy at this point in the story. He was all alone and afraid, and soon his torch began to go out. What would it be like to be alone in this setting? Just imagine. I'm not very keen on being outside and alone in the dark. Sometimes it can be a little bit scary, particularly if there's nothing else around. It's all right when you're at home and you've got familiar things and people around you. But he's up there in space, all alone, not knowing whether he can get home. He doesn't know who's out there, and he feels very alone and afraid, and it's going to get even darker when his torch goes out. So I want you to think about, if you were him, what would it be like to be alone in this setting? And I want you to get a piece of paper, and on your paper, I'd like you to mind map adjectives to describe the setting. Now remember, adjectives are words that describe nouns and feelings. So they're describing words we're thinking about. So I want you to think about the picture, and I want you to think about, let's have one more look at this picture. Look at the boy on the moon. He's all alone. And I want you to think about what he might see, what he might be able to touch or feel, what he might smell, what he might feel, his emotions, what he might hear, and what he might taste. And I want you to think about what he is able to do, what adjectives would describe these things. So, for example, for see, I've put infinite darkness because he'd be able to see forever and ever into the distance. And for smell, well, I've put musty. I'm not sure what it would smell like up in space because I've never been lucky enough to go up there. But maybe it feels a bit musty on the moon. I don't know. You might think it feels fresh, but whatever it is, jot down your ideas. And what might you hear? I was thinking about the whooshing wind. So I'd like you to pause the video for a minute and to have a think and to jot down as many adjectives as you can to describe the setting. Off you go. Okay, welcome back. So did you get any of these adjectives to describe the setting? I could see twinkling stars. There seemed to be a lot up there, and inky black darkness and infinite darkness and black as coal. What could he feel and touch? Or maybe it was bumpy. Maybe some of the surface was sharp like a cheese grater. Was it rocky, squishy? And what could he smell? Was it fresh, acidic, musty? And what did he feel? Alone, perhaps small, weightless, terrified, abandoned? And what could he hear? Could he hear a whoosh, or was it silent? Or could he hear the emptiness? And what could he taste? Maybe it was a bit salty. Maybe it was rotten. Maybe it was dusty and dry. I'd like you to have a think and to write down any of these adjectives that you didn't get and any more they've made you think about and add them or magpie them to your piece of paper. Okay. Then I want us to use our mind-mapped words to write a short descriptive paragraph about the setting of the picture. So I can use adjectives to create interesting sentences and paragraphs. We're only going to write one paragraph today. So I've written one here. Alone on the desolate surface of the moon, the boy gazed out into the inky black darkness. Twinkling stars blinked back at him from afar, the noiseless atmosphere ringing loudly. Nothing could be heard, total silence. What could be out in this unknown expanse? So frighteningly quiet, so terribly lonely. The pitch-black night sky closed in around him like a blanket. He was lost. Now, I'm looking at that and thinking, yeah, it's all right. It's got some good things in it, but could I improve it? Have a little think. For example, I've just put the moon. How could I describe the moon? What could I put in front of moon? What about the boy? How was the boy? Perhaps he was frightened. Perhaps it was the frightened boy. What could you add to make this better? Perhaps pause the video and have a little think. Can you think of a couple of things that you could do to improve my paragraph? Now, have I improved it? Let's have a little look. Well, I looked at the opening and instead of starting alone, I've put terrified because that's how he would be feeling. Terrified upon the desolate edge of the chalky moon. So I've described the moon using chalky. The frightened boy, so I've added the adjective frightened here, felt a melancholy feeling sink into the pit of his stomach as he gazed into the inky black darkness. Surrounded by gloom, only the crackling flames of the faraway sun broke the silence. Unsurprisingly, the darkness was never-ending. It even oozed on his fingertips. Shuddering, the cruel wind whipped round his entire body. Scanning the sky with his eyes, he had only the twinkling of the starry constellations to comfort him. He was alone. So, having had a little look at this, I've still got a short sentence for impact at the end. And I've got some good adjectives in there. I've underlined most of them. So I'm much more happy with that than I was with my original. Don't forget, you can go back over yours once you've written it. Can you improve the punctuation? Do you need to check any spelling? Can you add in any better vocabulary? So now it's your turn to write. Use the checklist to help you. Okay, leave that up in front of you and you've got a copy of the picture. And on your piece of paper, can you write a paragraph to describe this setting and how the boy is up on the moon, all alone? I bet you'll do a really good job and I look forward to hearing them because I'm sure they'll be amazing. When you've finished, you can have a look through the checklist. Only tick an item on the list if you can find it in your writing, and if you can't find it, you might want to go back through and see how you can up-level it. And as I said before, I can't wait to see your writing, and your teachers in Year 5 will be eagerly looking out for them on Monday evening. So please send in your work once you've done it. And until then, happy writing. I look forward to reading my class's work, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of our space writing. Goodbye.